Hi, I hope you're well today. Today I want to talk to you about the relationship between alcohol and mental health. And in order to do that, I'm going to give you a demonstration. I'm going to give you a little example of how this works. A couple of months ago, I went on the back of a bike with my boyfriend. He'd come home from work with this big Indian bike, which had a kind of, one of these big bikes that looks like it wasn't quite an armchair bike. It was one of these ones that had a backrest. So it was a really big, solid Indian bike, and it had a backrest for the passenger, the pillion at the back. And so we'd gone on this ride for the first time in decades. My second time I'd got on the back of this bike, and again I was terrified. I was terrified for the 2.5 hours we were on the back of this bike. We got to our destination, and then I started to relax on the 2.5 hour journey home. I started to relax. I started to really enjoy it. I think I've done another vlog about that somewhere. I've recorded a video about that. Well, a couple of nights ago, my boyfriend came home from work with this bike. Now, this is a completely different type of bike. I have no idea what it's called. I know it was another Indian, but this time it was something sleeker, something more mobile, something more dynamic, a lot faster, a lot smaller and lighter. And the seat off, he said, "Oh, let's pop round to my mum's and we'll go on the bike." And I said, "Okay then." When I looked at this bike, I thought, well, how the hell am I going to ride on the back of that thing? Because there was it didn't look like there was a seat, a proper seat with a back for a passenger. It was just a kind of, there was the rider's seat, and then there was just a kind of bit jutting out at the back. And I was supposed to sit on this bit jutting out at the back that had no sides, no back. And apparently there were sort of handles underneath it that I couldn't reach properly. And if I could reach them, it made me sort of scrunch up really awkwardly. So what I had to do was just kind of put my hands on either side of my boyfriend in front of me. And so I looked at this bike, I looked at this kind of bit that I had to perch on at the back, which was really high up. It was a lot higher up than my boyfriend was going to be. So you had his seat, and then this seat at the back was higher up. And it looked terrifying. And here's the thing. This is the bit that's kind of the whole point of what I'm sharing with you, is that I didn't bat an eyelid. I didn't feel anxious. Well, I felt a bit anxious. I felt a little bit scared, but I kind of dismissed those feelings and those thoughts. I kind of thought, oh, well, I'm going to give this a go. Let's see what happens. This is a different kind of bike. I was all right the first couple of times I've been on. I'll go on it again. I'll see what happens. It's totally different. We're only going a short journey. So I didn't pay any attention to any fear or anxiety that happened. I got into the appropriate clothing. I got into my heavy jeans, put a leather jacket on, despite the heat. I was absolutely sweltering. Perched on the back of this bike. So my knees were kind of up. I was kind of literally perched on top. I felt like anything could blow me off it. I wasn't allowed to cling on to my boyfriend. He'd just told me to lightly, hold on to him. And off we went. We went off on this bike. And as we were sort of weaving our way through the country lanes, I just got this sense of release, liberation. It was really good fun. It was scary. It was scary and fun at the same time. It was that kind of fear that turns into exhilaration. And I did feel vulnerable. I did feel exposed. But I really enjoyed it. And when I got off the bike at the end, I said to him, that was a lot funner than the other bike, the bigger, more robust bike that had its back that I could rest against and had plenty of things for me to hold on to. That had been fun, but this was funner. And I think it was because it felt lighter. It was smoother. It kind of danced around the bends more, and it had more of a flow to it. Now, you might or might not have any interest in bikes. This isn't the point of the story. The point of the story is that I felt completely released and liberated from all of that panic and anxiety and fear that I used to have in my drinking days. And that's because alcohol the science and the research shows us that alcohol and misuse of alcohol sustained drinking actually exacerbates, it makes mental health conditions worse. So if you're experiencing from anxiety attacks or any anxiety disorders, depression diagnoses, if you're further, there's a kind of spectrum of different mental health conditions, and if you're further down the end of the spectrum with personality disorders and other more serious mental health issues, wherever you are on that spectrum with depression, anxiety and other disorders, alcohol makes those disorders worse. It makes managing them worse. And I can certainly testify to that, because in my drinking days, my panic and my anxiety levels were way up high. And there are reasons for that. There's scientific reasons about what alcohol does to your brain, which I'm not going to go into now. But also it's about what alcohol does to your emotional state. So it reduces your self-confidence, it reduces your self-esteem, it reduces your self-respect. It also raises your fear levels, your paranoia levels, your shame levels, your guilt levels. And of course, all of those things destroy your self-confidence and your self-respect. And when things like self-confidence and self-respect are at a low level, of course, these mental health disorders have a kind of way in and they get worse. It's only when your self-confidence gets a chance to grow, your self-respect returns, your self-esteem returns, that you start being able to better manage some of these mental health issues. And I can testify to that, because if I'd have had that same experience with that bike the other night when I was drinking, in my drinking days, I would have been terrified. And the terror would have taken over from the enjoyment of the experience, from the adrenaline rush that was the actual experience. And it would have completely taken over. And yes, I probably would have gone ahead and done it anyway. But my attention, my focus and my energy would have been... It's really hard to explain what happens when you have a mental health issue or something sort of more mental and emotional than it is physical. But for me, that would have meant really tight breathing. It would have meant self-talk, a voice in my head that was telling me I was going to go mad. It would have been telling me I was going to be sick. It would have been, what if you have to be sick and you have to take your helmet off? What if you faint and you fall off the back of the bike? What if you hit a rut and the bike flips over? My voice in my head would have been telling me all sorts of things. My anxiety would have been up here and beyond. And the effect of that on my body would have been tension, to the point that I wouldn't be breathing properly and I'd start to feel lightheaded. And all of this would have been happening. Then at the end of the ride, my energy would have been on just relief at having done it. And then the way I would have rewarded myself from having gone through that high stress event would have been to have reached for alcohol. And of course, the more alcohol would have given me instant relief, and it would have reduced all of that tension, anxiety and fear. But it was just adding to a bigger problem over the years and making my anxiety and my panic worse. So I just wanted to demonstrate to you, or to share a little story with you about how far I've come in terms of all of those mental health issues I used to have when I was drinking are now just not there. They've just evaporated. But they only had a chance to evaporate because I stopped drinking for long enough to actually find alternative and healthier ways of managing them and dealing with them. So whether it's a ride on the back of someone's motorbike, whether it's a swim in the sea, whether it's standing on stage and delivering a presentation to hundreds of people, whatever it is that scares you, or maybe it's a fairground ride. I mean, for me, another thing was I was terrified of fairground rides. Whatever it is that causes the panic, that causes the anxiety, when you stop drinking for long enough to deal with some of those issues and learn to manage them better, you suddenly find that you can enjoy a whole range of experiences that you weren't able to enjoy before. For more inspiration, motivation and stories about living life happily and healthily sober, you can subscribe to my channel. I'll look forward to catching up with you very soon, but in the meantime, let's go get sober together.